primordial power of consciousness is called Shakti. It's also referred to in Sanskrit as Adi Parashakti, which is the primordial power of the universe, or the primordial force of consciousness. It's usually transmitted from one person to another. It's something that may be spontaneously bestowed on another through a master of the Shakti, through someone in whom the Shakti has taken residence. For a person to be complete, he or she must have both Shiva, pure consciousness, and Shakti, energy, or the energetic current that courses through the body. Meditation tends to lead one toward the Shiva consciousness, which is absolute stillness, total void, consciousness empty and freed of all of its contents. And Shakti is the vibrational energy which reverberates that consciousness which is utterly still, utterly silent, alone. You could even say that the Shakti is the bodily manifestation of the Shiva consciousness. It's the energetic aspect of pure consciousness. It's unusual for a person to come into the fullness of both simultaneously. I don't know why that is so, but it seems to be the case. One aspect of what we do is we meditate and abide in that stillness, that peace. Which has no beginning or end. And then we come out of that meditation, and there is a relationship we begin to have on the level of our personalities, our thinking process, etc. And we don't lose connection with that silence. When your relationship is still connecting to that deep, deep core of silence, it means that you're stable in that infinite consciousness, that it has stabilized itself in your life, and that you can function alongside it. That's a very peaceful place to be. It's a peaceful place to abide in. Out of that, the Shakti will emerge like a wave. And the purpose of that is so that the energy of meditation can then go out into the environment. It can affect the environment as a whole. Not just human beings, but nature, plants, animals, mountains. You've seen how the sun is necessary for plants to grow. You know that. In the same way, everything craves this Shakti, this energy, palpable, communicative. It's nourishing. It's nourishing on all levels. So once the Shakti manifests in an individual's experience, there's not so much detachment. Detachment is true of an earlier stage of realization. So when we're sitting here together, we're exploring this fabric of Shiva and Shakti. This fabric of energized silence. Again, just silence will take you deep into your inwardness and station you in a place of purity and detachment, where there's very little desire to motivate you. It's a desireless state or condition. So one needs to take a leap to come back into the field of desire after realizing that silence, that sublime silence of the self. And that leap is called surrender. Surrendering into the truth of one's experience. You'll see that at some point you can't go anymore. You've realized everything that there has to be realized about consciousness. You realize that you're separate from the world, perhaps that you've never been born. You'll have that kind of Advaitic realization that's described as knowing the self. Self, of course, written with a capital S. And at that point, it's as if everything has come to stillness. Everything has come to fruition in stillness. And there's nowhere to go. But what about the world? What about the world of perception? What about the changing world that you still need to live in, that you'll be forced to live in one way or another? Even if you're a recluse and you live in the jungles somewhere of the Himalayas, you still have to go somewhere to wash up in the morning, even if there's no other human being around. And if you don't go, then you just stay dirty. You still have to go find some berries to eat, or some seeds or nuts, if that's what you're eating. So there's no escape from action. That's why the Shakti realization is so important. That's why at some point you need to leap beyond silence into a more energetic communion with everything, without losing your enlightened state. It's very mysterious what this will look like, how this full fruition of Shiva and Shakti will appear. It's a great mystery. There is no specific way that it will appear. You may think after having read so many spiritual books you'll figure out how you're going to be in the end, but that's not allowable. You're living a unique quality of the present moment. You're living in a state that has no knowledge in it. It has no present, past, or future. It's just a movement outside of time. So that's what it looks like. It doesn't look like anything that it appears to be. So there's no really correct way to act spiritually. There's no correct, predetermined expression for living in the ultimate state of consciousness. Something that's lived in. It's something that you live day to day. And somehow you can function in that expanded condition of consciousness. You can function in it, you can perform action. Each person will be different. One of the traps human beings get into is that their knowledge begins to interfere with their state of being. In the urge to be secure, the human mind will memorize, store memories of some knowledge, some piece of knowledge, and then try to live according to that. When in fact, that's a kind of hysterical behavior from my point of view. To act with no bondage to memory produces a whole different quality of action. You might ask, well then, what is the value of all the religious scriptures and all the spiritual texts? Well, they're valuable as long as you're ignorant and you're seeking for enlightenment. As soon as you begin to taste awakening, there's no need for them. If you've been driving from Palm Springs to Los Angeles and using a map, once you're in Los Angeles, the map has no use. You don't keep studying the map. You try to acquire some kind of etiquette for how to behave in LA. It's silly, it doesn't make any sense. So human beings tend to be fixated on spiritual literature for some strange reason. Personally, I find it so dry. I think it's because of the promises that these texts make to people. You'll be in this paradisal realm, and you'll be in this heaven, and you won't go to this hell. So human beings who are selfish and small-minded bite right into that. You know what I'm saying? If I'm deluded and you come to me and talk about this imaginary realm, I'll listen to you. I'll want to follow your instructions on how to get there. Right? The most auspicious thing to do is to find a spiritual practice that connects you with your own life energy, your own consciousness, that is your own awareness, and practice that. That's the best way to approach enlightenment. Because you'll never get to enlightenment by reading about it. It's not in a book. It's not in a series of books. It's something that comes about through these interrupted periods in your life when there is an influx of spontaneous grace. It's when you're thrown off track. When you start to meet the unpredictable, that you get this glimpse of that which is beyond time. The human mind won't know what to do with it. In fact, the human mind is just nothing but a bundle of fear and conditioned memory. And so you expose the conditioned mind to this unlimited consciousness, and it doesn't know how to handle it. It may desperately run to a text afterwards to find some justification for what happened, but by that time it's lost. See, it's a miracle that you could come into this and live it. That's what I'm getting at. That anyone could come into full awakening and then go on living, that's an indescribable benediction. That you even have achieved full awakening is almost impossible. It's so rare to come into that alone. If that happens, something magnificent has happened. But if you come into it so deeply that you move in that, you talk in that, you do everything that you do in that supreme consciousness, that's a real profound miracle. That's something that there's no category for. One hasn't lost one's discrimination. One hasn't suffered the loss of one's devotion. Both are fully intact. The capacity to love is intact, and the capacity to transcend everything is intact. What is it that allows for this kind of flowering to happen? It's an atmosphere of trust and innocence. That is what an awakened atmosphere is. A trusting, innocent atmosphere where nothing is imposed on the individual. This realization comes from within each one of us. It's not something that comes from me to you or from some mysterious source to you. It's a flowering of life from within itself. So nothing can come between that and you. No text, nothing. here the silence is just as important as the words. If there's a long lapse of silence, it means that there's something more profound occurring than speech. Any questions?
So through grace one finds an awakened atmosphere. I was able to get to that awakened atmosphere and find it and recognize it. That doesn't necessarily make one more like a bhakti or a yogi or that kind of path, foundation in that atmosphere, does it?
It may increase the latent tendencies you have that are spiritual in nature. So if you're more of a devotional type, you may feel a wave of devotion here. Or if you're more geared toward knowing and discriminating and understanding, which is called jnana yoga, that also can become enlivened even here. I would say any kind of spiritual frequency can be tuned up here. It can be increased. Does that answer your question?
I think so. It seems to me that the two dissolve together, kind of the two sides of the same coin.
Devotion and knowledge,
Right.
or awakening and feeling.
In the midst of sahaja samadhi.
Oh, in that high state, yeah. If you're in a very relaxed state of continuous enlightenment, and you've penetrated the inner-outer barrier, and your consciousness is full and radiant, then in that state, you've gone beyond devotion and knowledge. You're beyond both paths. That's a good question. When you get into LA, you're not on I-10 anymore, you're not on 60, you're in LA. Right? So if you've traveled I-10, which is the path of knowledge, and 60 has more curves in it, so it's more devotional, it doesn't really matter. Once you're there, you're there. You don't remember the path. You may have some vague recollection of it.
When you're giving your discourse, and there's lots of gaps of silence, even when you're talking, the silence stands out more. Sometimes the words are just highlighting that silence and I can't follow them because I'm paying attention to that emptiness.
That's your experience?
My experience, yeah. It's just another aspect of meditation. It's like a continuation of the first part.
Mm-hmm.
It would almost take an effort to listen too closely to what you're saying.
Exactly. Tonight it was actually difficult to speak because the silence is so full. There's nothing to say. There's almost no connection even between the words and that state.
So there were times when I would come in and I would hear what you're saying, then I'd go back into the silence, and then I was like you're very distant, but they were just highlighting that presence.
That's beautiful. Very good. very powerful tonight. It was a great feeling, a great welling up. Anyone else? The transmission is very strong. You know, in India, they say that the Guru is more precious than God. Do you know that?
I don't know if I've heard that, but I think I understand.
You've heard that, right? Look, if you're drowning in the ocean, God made the ocean, so you just drown. But if a log comes by, you can grab it and hold on to it. That's what saves your life. Something that can be seen and touched in the field of perception that is also one with that Supreme Consciousness. The Supreme Consciousness by itself, without any form, is just nothing. Huh? It's nothing. Maybe it's written with a big N, but it's still nothing. Whereas when you have it emanating out of a human life that's fully established, then you can connect easily. You can reach out and touch it. So if you're drowning in the ocean of misery, you can pray to God and pray to God 1,000 times and nothing happens. But someone enlightened might walk by and you get a drink, you get a taste of that state that they're in, which comes through their nervous system to meet you, and you're helped immediately. So I agree with that Hindu proverb that the Guru is greater than God.
The Guru is also like a mirror.
Maybe.
I mean, in the sense that it reflects back through your own silence.
Maybe. Say more.
The silence that's in the room, I can find it as much inside as it appears to be outside. I think the source of it is within. It's magnified when I'm here.
I'm not too sure I understand. I'm saying but I felt polite to say You lost me. I still say the Guru is greater than God. There's something more precious going on that has nothing to do with words or silence. There's a particular radiation of light and intense feeling that happens spontaneously here. It comes right out of the heart area. It's not the byproduct of the mind. That's enlightenment. That's what that means. That golden, brilliant light that manifests in an atmosphere. It's no one's property. It's not affiliated with any religion, believe it or not. And it has a particular quality when it exudes out of an awakened nervous system, out of a human nervous system. It's not at all like praying by yourself or meditating by yourself in your room. It's not that. like the difference between, imagining the ocean, where it's all up here, and actually going to the ocean or actually see it with your eyes. If you're imagining the ocean, it's just a little picture inside here, in the skull somewhere. There's a little movie screen here, and it looks at its own imaginings. But to actually go to the ocean, it's a sensory experience. It's exquisite. It's something that is beyond imagining. So we're not even imagining anything. We're actually sitting in that radiant consciousness. To be in this state all the time, you have to be something more than a mediocre human being. To be something more than the conditioned mind. You can't be happy with that. If you're happy with that, then that's what you are. Do you agree? Do you agree? If you have no yearning for something beyond the ordinary, then why should it come to you? It's still nay. It's not even based on your wanting it. You know what I mean? Sometimes you hear about these people, they just get up one morning and they feel like they've woken from the dream. They've woken up into awakening. And other people will practice 20 or 30 years of meditation, they awaken. So it's not at all interested in your itinerary, your resume, your spiritual resume. Right? It has no interest in what you think you earn, or what you think you can earn through your practices. Why does it happen? We have no idea. I myself believe it's a kind of ripeness. You can call it a karmic ripeness if you want. That there's a certain time in life when everything is favorable to realizing that, and that appears. That appears. That's it. It doesn't come to you because you're better than the guy next door. It's just like apples on a tree. If the unripe apple could look out of the corner of its eye to the ripe apple, and it would say, I want to be like that someday. Big, juicy, red Macintosh apple. Organic, I hope. The green apple is feeling impoverished. It has no notion of what that state is like, to be that full. So then it starts to say, well, maybe I can meditate on the phrase, mature apple, mature apple, mature apple. And all the while, as it's repeating these slogans, time goes by. And then it invents other mantras like hummingbird, the unripe apple saw a hummingbird fly by, so it says, beautiful bird, beautiful bird. It's killing time with these practices. And then, but meanwhile, time is ripening it. Yes.
Is that maturing process coinciding with soul's disillusionment with conventional experience?
No. No. That's all part of the imagining, thinking that it's achieving something through spiritual technique.
Maybe the soul is not doing anything. They're just living life, but they're becoming more and more...
Yes. Yeah, some will go through that process of releasing all conditioning quickly. Some might do it in a week, others might do it in 10 years. But they're not relinquishing it. It's relinquishing itself over time.
They're not responsible for it.
Right.
There's that teacher, an invited teacher who spent 20 years drinking and partying and living a life of debauchery, you could say. Until finally he couldn't do it anymore. He just exhausted that whole thing. And he became a spiritual seeker just for a couple of years because he didn't know where he was going, and then he awoke. Could it be that those 20 years were not just wasted, but they're his way of just using up life till it really seemed to have no meaning anymore?
Who knows why he drank? It's too complicated. He could have been not wanting to face his own insides. He could have been conditioned to be an alcoholic because of his parents' genes, or who knows. I don't even want to make a comment on that. It's too complex. It's too complicated. I'm not saying spiritual practices are of no value. If you're going to kill time in life, you may as well meditate. Don't go rob houses. Right? Don't go robbing cars in LA just to wait until you're enlightened. That's not going to work. Drink yourself to death, or snort yourself to death, or do something fun. There's nothing you can do to hurry enlightenment. Find nice spiritual practice and enjoy it. That's so beneficial for the body. Spiritual practices enliven the energy in the body. They enliven the clarity of the mind. They even peel away the negative emotional layers that we acquire through our past, through conditioning, through our bringing up. They help us to relinquish all these things that are superimposed on our essential bliss, our essential nature, which is bliss. So spiritual practices could have a direct result also in awakening you to your own peace, that you're already peaceful. It's just that the spiritual technique allows you to not follow, not be led by your own instability and insecurity and fear. It teaches you how to witness that, and then after you learn how to let that go, you then come into your own natural state of samadhi and peacefulness. Does that make sense? So spiritual techniques, I've practiced them my whole life, are exemplary. They're perfection itself. If they're done with calmness and innocence, love, appreciation, not trying to win, not trying to get enlightened and win that way, but doing it because it's a gift that's been given to you, and practicing it with reverence. Spiritual techniques are very powerful.
But awakening is beyond cause and effect.
It's within cause and effect too.
It's not merely the result of a cause.
It is the cause.
Yes.